Gretchen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I was just reading again your bio, before you joined, and you have such an incredible deep background of working with companies of all different sizes and cultures and what have you. I think what really resonated with me, I actually have to read the lines, um, about when you work with organizations, the outputs are on really increasing revenues, establishing honest and inclusive cultures, aligning mindsets and behaviors that really impact and foster just a positive, working relationship and culture within an organization. That is not easy to do. So, there are so many components, emotional, psychologically, to intermix with that, not to mention just org structures and all kinds of stuff. So I want to get into some of that today, but I don't want to steal your thunder. I'd love just to hear from you a little bit more about your background and how you got into the really impactful work that you're doing today.
All right. Well, it's a story, but aren't they all? And I think this is a great example of like no experience is ever wasted, how it all kind of weaves together.
Yeah.
So early in my career, I did something called graphic facilitation.
Hmm.
And in graphic facilitation, you're literally illustrating the conversation that's happening in the room. And so large organizations use this when they're doing large scale meetings. And
Mhm.
all that meant was that I had 7 years of literally traveling around the world in different companies, working with different facilitators at the time, and listening to the way the people think. And
Mm.
when you're illustrating a conversation, your back is to the room, and so you're listening not just to what people say, but also to what isn't being said and breathing patterns. And how does that different when you're, in North America or in country in Asia or South America? And so I really think about that as my 10,000 hours. I'm really
Yep.
listening to how people think. And that led me directly into facilitating strategic conversations. I was naturally good at that. We're going to be talking about strengths. It was one of my strengths. And I spent a lot of time with very senior teams helping them think through strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that people were spending a lot of time and money designing organizational systems, and
Hmm.
they were not spending the same amount of time or money helping people think
Mm.
and changing the way people think. And that, like, the number one obstacle to successfully executing on a great idea is people, is human
Hmm.
nature. And so that got me really interested in the field that where I am now by passion and by project. So really evolved into a master's in applied positive psychology to help me sort of um, partner up my street smarts with some good, strong theory and evidence to kind of understand that. And then scaled that into pLink leadership, where we do executive coaching and leadership development that is designed to be an enterprise solution. I think, and I just qualify that because sometimes when you think about executive coaching, it's like a
Yep.
one off
Hmm.
outside benefit. And the way that we approach it is that this is integrated into your strategy. And the goal is to make it all fit together so that people are working both individually and collectively on the things they need to be working on to be able to advance the strategy.
Love
And it
that.
is hard. I mean, it's really fun and we love doing it. I love doing it.
Yes.
And it is hard. It's like turning an aircraft carrier
Yeah.
to get a whole bunch of people pointed in the same direction. But hard stuff is worth doing, and I love doing it.
It is. So tell us a little bit more about the strengths component. I know you were alluding to that too. How are you, when you're working with individuals and teams, really defining like strengths? You talk about strengths versus skills, and how do you define those two?
Well, I mean, we go back to the theory on that. Like, we are not the original authors of the strengths theory. Really, that would be the Clifton strengths, which roots back to Gallup.
Hmm.
And so they are really the preeminent experts in this area. So they define a strength as a talent
Hmm.
plus knowledge, plus skill, plus time invested.
Hmm.
So what's important about that is that a talent is a naturally occurring way of thinking and feeling and doing. Like, it's something that you don't have to think hard about doing. You're just sort of drawn to it,
Yep.
and maybe you're naturally good at it. But it doesn't become a strength
Hmm.
unless you flank it with knowledge, flank it with skills development, and then invest the time.
Hmm.
So you can have raw talent that never becomes a strength. A strength is when you've invested that time and it just becomes a part of who you are in terms of your thinking, feeling, and doing. And that trio is important because behavior we know is motivated by emotion, and emotion is driven by thought. So, it all kind of works together to make us very good at something with less effort and a lot more enjoyment. Like the act itself delivers satisfaction, not just the output.
Mm.
And that's a strength. Like
Yep.
that's what strength and action, like, and then a skill, you can be really good at something that is not a strength. The
Hmm.
distinction is that exercising a skill consumes energy.
Hmm.
Exercising a strength produces energy even while it's putting it out.
That's such a great way to think about it, just sort of in simple terms. So, can you maybe share some examples for how you've been able to pull out strengths amongst teams or skills amongst team? I love how do you kind of slice and dice that when you get involved with an organization and being
Yeah.
able to kind of pull those nuances out?
So it's important to know that people cannot make change successfully if they're not standing on firm ground.
Hmm.
So we always start with helping people be sure they have a clear understanding of who they are in
Hmm.
their current context.
Hmm.
And that's important because context does change. Like you can take a great leader in one context, change their context, meaning they go to a different company altogether, or
Yep.
maybe their role completely changes. And all of a sudden, they're starting to get negative feedback, or
Mhm.
the other way around. They're struggling over here, they get lateral, or they go into, and they just boom and bloom, right? So,
Mhm.
so the context is important. We help them to really understand who they are in that context. Strength is a big component of that. So is values. So is, how you see your future best self.
Mhm.
Um, and so we use the Clifton Strength Finders assessment to get a baseline, right?
Mhm.
And we tell people going in, like, this is not truth. It's a
Yeah.
doorway to insight. It's a
Right.
doorway to insight. And we ask them to sort of read through the Strengths Insight report and say, which of this feels most true to you?
Mhm.
Give a blank version of your guide to somebody who knows you well and ask them which things in here stand out for you as being true.
Yeah.
And then work with that. And then from there, we help them to think through like which are these ones that feel most true to us. Like I know this to be true about myself for as long as I can remember.
Mhm.
Um, and then we really move forward from there to help them understand like what does that look like when it's in excellence, meaning it's serving you really well and you're using it in the way that makes sense and is productive.
Mhm.
And where might you be overusing it? I
Mhm.
think this was one of my early really big insights, which is that oftentimes an area of development or what people refer to as a weakness, I don't like to use that language because it implies that it's an inherent flaw in
Mhm.
us when
Yes.
really a
Fierce mindset.
weakness is just something that other people don't like. Just
Mhm.
like a weed is still a plant, it's just a plant growing in a place you don't want it.
Yes. Yes.
So, right? So it's like, so I like the notion of an area of development or an area of an opportunity. And we have these areas of development that we hear all the time,
Mhm.
right? You're honest to a fault, or why don't you ever sit down, or how come it's so important to you to sort of be the architect of what's going forward. And we hear it so many times, and it's connected to one of our strengths in excess.
Mhm.
Because we have to remember, like when we're using a strength, it feels fulfilling to us. It
Mhm.
feels natural to us.
Mhm.
It leaves us rewarded. But sometimes we can overuse it, and other people experience that as a flaw.
Mhm.
And so then they give us that feedback and they tell us, you shouldn't be like this.
Mm.
But then we tell ourselves, well, how can I not be like this? Like, this is who I
You
am.
are. Hmm.
This is who I am. So then if we start to understand that it's about volume, right?
Hmm.
Like we are like, oh, we just have to learn how to modulate the volume. So
Hmm.
if I have the strength of ideation and
Hmm.
I love to throw ideas around, when I'm hanging out with other people who also have the strength of ideation,
Yes.
we're speaking each other's language and we can go to town with that. But if I'm in a room full of people who maybe are in charge of making the plan real, right? They're more of the executing strengths.
Yes.
I need to temper my ideation because
Mm.
I'm just thinking out loud. But to them, they're become overwhelmed with all the different directions something can go, or
Yep.
how would we make that real?
Yep. So I see that as well. Oftentimes, or can frankly just get off track from a strategy that's preset, and making sure that they're
Yeah,
aligned.
that's like a
Innocently, right? Just
totally
a
innocently. They don't even
passion.
know, we don't even know we're doing it. Like unless we've done the work to understand our strengths and what do they look like in excellence. We've just pop off with an idea. And then we're like shocked when other people don't love that we're contributing an idea.
Hmm.
And somebody else might be say like, Gretchen, like, we're 10 days down the path on this. We're not going to change right now.
Right, right. So when you're going through and doing these strengths assessments, are you doing this across the team, or is it just within a department or a leadership team, or is it sort of case by case with the engagement?
Yeah, I was going to say yes, and
Okay.
so it's part of if we're doing individual coaching as part of every coaching package,
Mhm.
but it's also not uncommon at all to start this way. Like if you are bringing a team together for the first time, or say you have a new leader to a pre-existing team, it's a great opportunity to do a strengths inventory and to understand like who's on the team, how, and help people have the conversation with each other about which of the strengths they see most present in their leadership style in their current context, what
Mhm.
they lean into when they need courage or when they're making a decision. We have a conversation where we ask people to share what they see as their superpowers and kryptonite,
Mm,
right? So it's not like you say, "Oh, my superpower is futuristic ideation maximizer." Like that doesn't make
right.
any sense to anybody. It's like, wait, what? How does that even translate, right?
Mhm.
But if you're able to say my superpower is in really helping people figure out where they can make their contribution, or my
Right.
superpower is in seeing around corners, or my
Mhm.
superpower is in helping us think about a different way of doing something,
Mhm.
then people are like, oh, okay, I get it. I
Yep.
get it.
It feels more tangible or real or what have you.
Yeah, it's like what you see in them every day. So that's like how a team would use it when you're first coming together and building a foundation.
So fascinating. So, you'd given the example earlier about kind of the ideation example, right? You'd be in a work
Mhm.
setting and there's maybe someone who's in more of a senior leadership role, a CEO or what have you. It's just an ID, like they're an ideator. Um, but sometimes those situations where they're perhaps over-indexing on their strength innocently come out in just natural ways. What role do you play? I don't know if the right word is intervene, but to be able to help kind of coach teams along the way and those things that are just naturally coming, come up through the day. Is it those one-on-one conversations? How do you kind of be that fly on the wall to help guide the teams?
Yeah, well, I think that is different by engagement. It really depends on what they're asking you to be in there for. But the initial meeting that we do, like typically it's a 1 day session where you've got a team together, either virtually or in person, and you're doing both values and strengths to lay the foundation.
Mhm.
And you're helping them to have that conversation with each other. We give them an artifact afterwards so they can see how the team lays out. It would also be really important for me to say out loud that just because something's not your strength doesn't mean you're not really good at it.
Mm,
So a common mistake we see people being like, this is so great. Like I want everybody to have a placard with their strengths and we put that outside their office or their cubicle. And this is a
right.
terrible idea because it's like, you wouldn't say, oh, well, Lauren, Lauren doesn't have any strategy strengths. We're just not going to invite her,
Mhm.
to this conversation.
Just
Like
boxing
that's
people. Yeah.
boxing, and that's also not how it works.
Yeah.
The strength piece of it is that you are more naturally good at it and you're going to be drawn towards wanting to do it.
Hmm.
So that piece of it is different and it's going to energize you doing it. Typically, you would also say people have a higher, faster rate of learning when they're in a strength.
Right.
Um, and people, by virtue of knowledge and skill and time invested, can become very skilled at something. And
Mhm.
whether how they recharge afterwards, that's none of our business. So
Mhm.
I think it's really important to say that, make sure people are clear that as an individual, it's your decision point about like how you want to navigate your role and where you want to be investing yourself. What I'll say as a coach with many years of experience is that it's not uncommon to see people build entire careers on their skills because we believe we deserve to be paid for what feels hard and we give away what feels easy.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
people volunteer in their area of strength, people discount their services in their area of strength, they give it away for free in their area of strength. And then they're like, this is where I'm going to charge. And then you end up, like creating a structure, a lifestyle, a portfolio of services or clients that you're like, why am I doing this? I'm not enjoying it. I'm really good
Yeah.
at it, but I
And then
don't
you look
enjoy it.
around, you go, gosh, not everyone's as good at doing what I'm doing, right? So,
The
um,
other things, yeah.
yep,
So I would just
awareness.
offer that. So going back to your question, our goal would be to equip the team to talk to each other
Mhm.
about the strengths, and then to be able to do some one-on-one coaching with, like, for example, the more senior people to help them to understand where they might habitually over-index. That's
Mhm.
part of our workshop, right? Is
Yep.
understanding which are the ones that you might have a habit of over-indexing on, and what might trigger that.
Yep. Super interesting. So it sounds like bringing not only self-awareness, but not boxing that self-awareness, and then along the way helping to coach individuals so that they can flourish, where they might not have recognized strengths before. So, uh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think more in an organizational development, the hardest part is that you're thinking on three levels all the time, like individual, team, and then let's call it mission.
Mhm.
Like, so you kind of have to be thinking about that all, like as an individual, how do I want to think about my own strengths?
Mhm.
As a leader, how do I want, and a colleague, how do I want to capitalize on the strengths of my team? And
Mhm.
as a person who has responsibility for the mission and the vision, how are we doing moving towards that? And who might I need to move around, or what responsibilities might I need to move around to make that journey easier?
So fascinating. Oh my goodness.
Mhm.
Gretchen, this is such a like a deep topic, right? And it's so important and impacts all of us, and the workplace. And so I really appreciate you sharing your insights and depth of perspective and working with teams, especially all different sizes. Are there any other kind of final thoughts or kind of takeaways that you like to share with folks as well?
I think that I guess what I would end with is that we spend so much time at work. We spend so much of our waking hours at work. Why wouldn't we want that to be as enjoyable as possible?
Mhm.
And some of that is about other people interacting with us and what we can manage and what we can't manage, but a
Right.
lot of it has to do with the work that we do. And so if we job craft ourselves, like we don't even have to change jobs. If we just job craft ourselves into a set of responsibilities that tap our strengths, it not only makes our outcomes better, but it changes our quality of experience.
Mindset, it like lifts up. Yep.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you're like, "Ooh, I feel filled up. That was so good," as opposed to just feeling wiped out and drained.
Yes, so well said. So, well, Gretchen, thank you again for your time. We'll make sure to include links as well to
Yeah,
your bio and website and what have you. But so
that'd be great.
fascinating. So many great nuggets to take away. So thank you again.
Good. You're welcome.